The night was unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your skin and whispers to your instincts that something unseen, is about to change forever. A single lamp flickered inside an old, forgotten study where Daniel Hargrove sat hunched over a pile of yellowed journals. He hadn't slept properly in 3 days. His hair was disheveled, his eyes hollow, and his fingers trembled as they traced the ink of his father's final words. You cannot escape the law you neglect, nor the truth you refuse to nourish. He read that line again, slower this time, tasting the words as if they carried poison, or perhaps a cure. It was all he had left of the man who once commanded both fear and reverence in equal measure. His father, Jonathan Hargrove, had been a philosopher, a businessman, and a mystery wrapped inside 1,000 contradictions. To the world, he was brilliance incarnate. To Daniel, he was an enigma, one that had vanished 10 years ago, leaving behind ruins of an empire and questions that refused to fade. But now, after all this time, the journals had surfaced, sent anonymously, with no explanation, to Daniel's door. The first page was dated 1989, but the last entry, written in hurried scrawl, carried a chilling note. When you neglect the truth, it decays. When you nourish it, it grows, and it will find you, Daniel, whether you want it to or not. Daniel's breath hitched. He wasn't sure if he felt fear or fascination. Somewhere deep inside, a storm was awakening. The fireplace crackled suddenly, breaking the silence. Daniel's eyes darted to the flames, and for the briefest moment, he thought he saw a figure reflected there, tall and motionless, watching him. He blinked and it was gone. He laughed softly at himself, though uneasily. "You're losing it," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that the room itself was alive. The air seemed heavy, dense with something, memory, maybe, or guilt. He turned the page. The next passage wasn't his father's handwriting. It was unfamiliar, elegant yet cold. There are laws greater than men's. You neglect them, they consume you. You nourish them, they guide you. Choose, and quickly. The harvest of neglect is decay. Daniel frowned. Who had written this? His pulse quickened as he flipped through more pages. Some were missing entirely, torn clean from the spine. Others contained cryptic symbols and Latin phrases. And then one word repeated across the margins, again and again, as if written in desperation. Balance. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. A knock came at the door, soft, deliberate, and wrong for the hour. Daniel froze. It was nearly 2 a.m. No one visited him this late. His small house stood on the edge of the old Hargrove estate, far from the nearest neighbor. Another knock followed, firmer this time. He swallowed hard and rose from his chair, glancing once more at the journals before moving toward the door. The third knock was louder. "Who's there?" he called out. No answer. The fourth came with a strange rhythm, like a code. 3 short knocks. Too long. Then silence. Daniel's mind raced. That pattern, it was familiar. His father used to knock that way when Daniel was a boy, whenever he wanted to be let into the study. He felt his skin prickle. It wasn't possible. "Dad." The word escaped before he could stop it, trembling and foolish. The silence deepened. He hesitated only a second longer before unlocking the door. The cold wind rushed in, scattering papers across the floor. But there was no one outside. Only the trees, their silhouettes shifting under a restless sky. He looked down and saw an envelope on the doorstep, sealed with black wax. No return address. Just his name, Daniel Hargrove. He closed the door quickly and tore it open. Inside was a single card. On one side, a faded photograph of his father standing in front of an enormous tree, its roots gnarled and twisted like serpents. On the other side, a message written in the same elegant hand from the journal. You neglected what he nourished. Now, nourish what he neglected. The words made no sense, and yet something inside him stirred, a memory buried deep in the dust of childhood. The tree. He had seen it before. The tree of concord, his father once called it. It stood in the middle of the old Hargrove orchard, where the estate had been abandoned decades ago. His father used to take him there and whisper lessons that Daniel was too young to understand. About choices. About laws that governed more than just men. He shivered. Could this be a clue? Or a warning? A distant creak drew his attention. The house had settled, or so he told himself. But as he turned toward the fireplace again, he froze. The journals on the desk were no longer where he'd left them. They were stacked neatly in a pile, the top one open to a new page. His name was written there in fresh ink. It begins where the roots meet the earth. His breath came shallow. He reached out, fingertips trembling, and closed the book. He couldn't explain it. Not the letter, not the handwriting, not the feeling that the past was reaching out with invisible hands. But one thing was certain. He had to go back. To the orchard. To the place where it all began. He packed a flashlight, his father's journal, and the mysterious letter into a leather satchel. The rain outside had begun to fall harder now, each drop echoing against the roof, like a ticking clock counting down to something inevitable. As he stepped into the storm, locking the door behind him, he couldn't shake one haunting thought that refused to leave his mind. Perhaps the laws his father spoke of weren't metaphors at all. Speech balloon, if you're captivated by where this story is going, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories like this. It means the world and keeps me creating. The wind howled through the broken branches as Daniel trudged up the hill toward the orchard. The path was half consumed by weeds, the trees skeletal under flashes of lightning. But he could still see it, the massive oak standing alone in the middle of the field, just as he remembered. Its trunk was scarred, its bark dark with age. He reached it and pressed a hand to the wood. The surface was damp and strangely warm, pulsing faintly beneath his palm. And then he heard it. A voice.
Low. Faint.
Familiar. Daniel. He spun around, scanning the trees. Nothing. Just rain and darkness. The voice came again, closer this time, almost a whisper in his ear. You found me. Daniel stumbled back, his heart pounding. Who's there?
The tree groaned.
The ground shifted beneath him, and something glittered faintly between the roots, a brass key, half buried in the mud. He crouched and picked it up, cold metal biting into his fingers. As soon as he did, a sharp crack split the air. The bark on the tree split open along an ancient seam, revealing a hollow cavity inside, like a doorway. A soft light glowed within. Daniel's mind screamed to run, but his legs didn't listen. He took a step closer, then another, and from the hollow, he heard a voice he hadn't heard in a decade, his father's voice, calm and steady as ever. Welcome back, son. The law you neglected has come due. The light pulsed once, and the world around him began to change. To be continued, the light enveloped Daniel completely, swallowing the orchard, the rain, and the very sound of his own breath. For a moment, there was only brilliance, white and endless. Then the world snapped back into form. He was standing inside a vast underground chamber. The air was thick with the scent of old earth and something else, metallic and faintly electric. The walls pulsed with a dim golden light that seemed to come from veins running through the stone itself. His heart hammered as he took in the sight before him. Rows of bookshelves carved from the rock reached high into the ceiling. Between them stood statues, tall, solemn figures, their eyes cast downward. Each one held a tablet inscribed with strange symbols. The floor beneath his feet was engraved with a circle of words he recognized from his father's journals. Neglect breeds decay. Nourish, and life shall rise. Daniel turned slowly, clutching the brass key. Dad, he called out, his voice echoing in the cavern. The answer came not as a sound, but as a presence. The air thickened. A faint shimmer appeared in front of him, gathering into the shape of a man. Jonathan Hargrove. He looked exactly as Daniel remembered. Sharp eyes, calm expression, dressed in the same old coat he used to wear in winter. But his figure glowed faintly, not quite solid, like a reflection in water. You came, his father said softly, voice both near and far. Daniel took a hesitant step forward. What is this? Are you? Alive?
No.
Not in the way you understand. His father's tone carried both sadness and pride. This place is what remains of my work and my failure. I told you once, Daniel, that the laws we live by are more than human. I thought I could master them. I was wrong. Daniel's grip tightened on the key. What laws?
What are you talking about?
You disappeared. Left everything. Left me. Jonathan's expression didn't change. You felt it already. Every choice we neglect, every truth we abandon, it doesn't vanish. It roots itself in the unseen world. It grows there, waiting. You nourish virtue, and it strengthens you. You nourish neglect, and it feeds on you. He stepped closer, his form flickering. I tried to harness it, to prove that the balance could be bent. I nourished ambition but neglected conscience. And the law came to collect. Daniel shook his head, trying to process the words. You're saying this is, what, some kind of punishment? A curse? His father's faint smile carried no warmth. Call it a consequence. The chamber trembled slightly, dust falling from the ceiling. The golden veins in the stone pulsed brighter. Jonathan turned toward the light. It's waking again. The balance has been disturbed, Daniel. You're here because it's chosen you to finish what I couldn't. Daniel's pulse spiked. Finish what? You left me nothing but riddles. Jonathan pointed toward a stone pedestal at the far end of the chamber. Upon it rested an hourglass, its sand dark as ash, unmoving. Beside it lay a second key, smaller and silver. That, his father said, is the measure of nourishment. When the upper glass empties, the law will seal its judgment. You must find what I neglected before that happens. Daniel frowned. And what did you neglect? Jonathan's gaze fell to the ground.
Faith.
Compassion. Truth. His form flickered violently, as if some unseen force was pulling him apart. I can only remain as long as the balance allows. Listen to me, Daniel. The key you hold opens what's hidden, but the silver one opens what's forgotten. You'll need both before dawn. The chamber began to shake harder now. The shelves rattled, and faint whispers filled the air, voices speaking in a language Daniel didn't know but somehow understood. They spoke of hunger, of years spent waiting. Dad, he shouted, reaching forward. But his father's figure was already fading. Remember, Jonathan said, his voice thinning like smoke. Nourish what you fear. Starve what tempts. The law always collects. And then he was gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel stared at the spot where his father had stood until the golden light dimmed again. The whispers receded, but not entirely. He slipped the brass key into his pocket and approached the hourglass. Its surface was smooth and cold, carved with the same symbols that filled the journals. He could feel something alive inside it, a vibration that matched the beating of his own heart. A faint sound echoed behind him. He turned sharply, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. A figure darted between the shelves, too quick to see clearly. Hey! Daniel called out, taking a step forward. The beam caught a glimpse of a cloak disappearing around a corner. He followed, boots echoing against stone. The passage twisted deeper underground, the air colder, the golden veins growing sparser until they vanished completely. He stopped at a doorway covered by roots. They pulsed faintly, as if the tree above still breathed life into them. The brass key grew warm in his hand. He fitted into a small slot in the stone beside the door, and with a grinding sound, the roots loosened and drew back. Beyond lay another chamber, smaller, circular, filled with mirrors that reflected his light back at him in strange, distorted angles. His reflection stared from every surface, dozens of versions of himself overlapping and shifting. A whisper rippled through the room. Neglect. He spun around. Who said that? Another voice, softer, closer. You did. His reflection in the nearest mirror blinked, but Daniel hadn't. The image smirked faintly, tilting its head. You carry the same neglect your father did, it said. He tried to control the law. You try to run from it. Daniel's breath came fast. You're not real. The reflection laughed. Reality bends to what you nourish. It stepped forward in the glass, pressing a hand against the surface. The mirror rippled like water. "Do you remember the night you let your brother go alone into the storm?" Daniel froze. The memory hit like lightning. Years ago, when he was 16, his younger brother Eli had gone missing during a thunderstorm. Daniel had refused to go after him, too angry over an argument. They found the boy's jacket 2 days later, tangled near the riverbank. His reflection's eyes gleamed. Neglect.
It took him then.
"It's coming for you now." "Shut up," Daniel shouted, slamming his fist against the glass. Cracks spidered out, but instead of shattering, the mirror bled light. The reflection didn't vanish. It stepped through. Daniel stumbled back as his double emerged, solid and cold, eyes glowing faintly gold. It looked identical to him, but its face was calm, eerily composed. "What are you?" Daniel whispered. "I am what you refused to nourish," it said, voice steady. "The part of you that watched and did nothing. You cannot destroy me. You can only face me."
The double advanced.
Daniel swung his flashlight, striking its shoulder, but it passed through as if hitting smoke. The thing's hand closed around his throat, not strangling, just holding him still. "Your father's law was not about punishment," it murmured. "It was about balance. Every neglect births a shadow. Every truth you nourish burns one away. Which will you feed?" Daniel could barely breathe. "How do I?" The double leaned closer, its eyes inches from his. "Find the silver key before the hourglass empties. Or become what your father became, trapped between the laws you ignored." It released him and stepped backward into the mirror, vanishing with a sound like a sigh. The cracks sealed. The whispers fell silent. Daniel staggered, coughing, hand clutching his throat. His reflection stared back at him, normal again. But the brass key in his pocket was hot enough to burn. He pulled it out. It glowed faintly, pulsing with light. The veins on the walls lit once more, pointing toward a narrow corridor at the far end of the chamber. Daniel looked toward it, breathing hard. Somewhere ahead, deep in the labyrinth of stone, the silver key awaited, and with it, the truth his father had buried. He wiped the sweat from his brow, tightened his grip on the light, and stepped forward into the darkness. The corridor was narrow and uneven, its walls slick with moisture and streaked with veins of faint silver light. Daniel moved cautiously, his flashlight beam trembling across carvings that lined the stone. Each engraving depicted figures, some human, others not, locked in eternal struggle. One nourished a flame cupped in their hands, another turned away as vines crawled over their body, consuming them whole. Beneath each carving was the same phrase etched in Old Latin, Lex vitae non fugit, the law of life does not flee. His footsteps echoed softly, each one sounding heavier than the last. He felt the weight of unseen eyes watching him from the shadows, as though the very walls were sentient. The brass key pulsed gently in his hand, guiding him like a compass. Occasionally, he'd catch the sound of whispers again, faint, disjointed syllables that seemed to come from within his own skull. He couldn't make out the words, but they carried the same tone his father used when warning him as a child, calm, measured, but filled with gravity. He turned a corner and stopped. The corridor opened into another chamber, smaller than the previous one, lit by an eerie silver glow radiating from the floor. In the center stood a pedestal, and upon it, a bowl filled with liquid metal that shimmered like mercury. Above the bowl hung a chain from which the silver key dangled, swaying slowly as if stirred by an invisible wind. Daniel exhaled. Finally. He stepped forward, but the ground quivered slightly beneath his boots. The silver light rippled, spreading outward like water disturbed by a stone. He hesitated. The air here felt different, charged like standing inside a thundercloud. Still, he reached out toward the key. The moment his fingers brushed the chain, the liquid metal erupted upward in a spiral, twisting into shapes, faces, arms, forms that screamed without sound. The key vanished into the churning mass. Daniel stumbled backward, shielding his eyes as the light grew blinding. When it dimmed, the liquid had solidified into a figure. It was his father again, or what resembled him. The face was sharper, colder, carved in silver rather than flesh. Its eyes glowed white, and when it spoke, its voice was both Jonathan's and something ancient layered beneath. "You should not have come alone." Daniel's pulse thudded. "What are you?" The figure stepped down from the pedestal, each movement smooth and unnatural. "Reflection, consequence, memory. It is all the same here. You seek the key, but the law demands a price. What will you offer in return?" "I've offered enough," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "You took my father, my brother, my peace. I'm not giving you anything else." The figure tilted its head, the faintest hint of a smile curling its metallic lips. "Neglect speaks in excuses. Nourishment speaks in sacrifice. Choose." Daniel took a step back, but the ground behind him shifted. The walls moved, closing inward as if the chamber itself were breathing. The metallic figure raised its hand, and the bowl of liquid rose into the air again, swirling above them. Within the fluid, images flickered: his childhood home, his mother's face, his father working late into the night, pages upon pages of notes burning in a fire. Then, the night of the storm, Eli's jacket floating down the river. Daniel's throat tightened. "Stop it." The silver being's eyes flared. "You cannot escape what you neglected." The liquid twisted once more and formed the image of Daniel himself, older, colder, standing alone in a decaying house. He recognized it instantly. It was his future. The voice thundered around him. "This is the harvest of neglect, the withered fruit of what you refuse to tend. Only through nourishment can the law restore balance." Daniel clenched his fists. "Then tell me what to do." The being regarded him silently, then extended its hand. "Give me your memory of guilt. Let it feed the law. Only then will the key be yours." He hesitated. "My memory? Your brother's death binds you to decay. Release it, and the law will release you." The offer hung heavy in the air. For a moment, Daniel felt tempted to forget the pain, the regret, the image of Eli's face that haunted every dream. It sounded almost merciful. But something deep inside him whispered a warning. His father's last words echoed in his mind. "You cannot escape the law you neglect, nor the truth you refuse to nourish." "No," he said finally. "I won't forget him." The figure's expression darkened. "Then you will feed neglect." The chamber shook violently. The bowl shattered, spilling molten silver across the floor. It spread like a living thing, reaching for Daniel's boots. He leapt back, grabbing the brass key and pressing it to the silver figure's chest. The moment metal met metal, the entire room screamed, a sound that wasn't made by any human throat. The figure shattered into shards that dissolved into mist. The silver key clattered to the floor. Daniel bent down, breathing hard, and picked it up. It was warm, almost comforting to the touch. But as he held it, the veins of light along the walls began to fade. The path he'd come through was sealing itself shut. Panic surged. He looked around and saw another passage appear behind the pedestal, this one narrow and steep, spiraling upward. He ran. The tunnel twisted endlessly, and the further he climbed, the warmer the air became. Soon the stone gave way to roots and soil. He could hear water dripping somewhere above. His lungs burned, his body aching, but he didn't stop. The brass key pulsed brighter with every step, as if urging him onward. When he finally emerged, he was no longer in the orchard. The moon hung low and pale over a landscape he didn't recognize, barren hills under a bruised sky. The great oak was gone. In its place stood a ruin, pillars, broken archways, and scattered stones forming the skeleton of some forgotten temple. Daniel stumbled forward, clutching both keys. The silence here was suffocating. No birds, no wind, only the faint hum of something alive beneath the earth. A shadow moved at the edge of the ruins. He froze. A woman stepped into the moonlight. She was tall, wrapped in a cloak the color of ash, her hair streaked with silver that shimmered faintly. Her eyes glowed faintly gold, the same as his reflections had. "You carry the keys," she said, her voice smooth and even. "Then the inheritance has begun." Daniel raised the flashlight, though it seemed unnecessary now. The air itself glowed faintly around her. "Who are you?" "I am the keeper," she said. "The law you seek to understand is older than your father's ambitions. It binds everything that lives and decays. He trespassed here once, believing he could alter it. Now you walk his path." Daniel swallowed. "I don't want to alter anything. I just want to end this." Her expression softened. To end is to nourish decay. To continue is to nourish life. Choose carefully. She extended her hand. The silver key unlocks remembrance. The brass key reveals truth. Together, they open the chamber of consequence. But once opened, you cannot turn away. Daniel hesitated. "What happens if I refuse?" Her eyes darkened. "Then the law will choose for you." Thunder rolled across the hills, though the sky showed no lightning. Daniel looked at the keys, one dull and earthen, the other gleaming and pure. His father's words echoed again, but they no longer sounded like a warning. They sounded like a promise. He stepped toward the keeper and placed both keys into her hand. The ground trembled. The ruins flared with light, symbols igniting across the stones in a web of gold and silver. The air hummed with energy, sharp and powerful. The keeper smiled faintly. "You have nourished truth. Now face what it reveals." The light surged outward, swallowing everything. The hills, the ruins, even the stars, until all that remained was Daniel, standing in the center of the storm, waiting for what would come next. The storm of light surrounded Daniel, and for the first time since his father's disappearance, he felt no fear. The air trembled with power, golden and silver streams twisting around him like ribbons of living fire. Every breath vibrated with energy, each heartbeat echoing against the unseen walls of creation. The ground beneath his feet dissolved into pure radiance, and then, suddenly, everything went still. He stood in a place beyond time. There was no sky, no horizon, only a vast expanse of light and shadow. Before him stood the keeper, no longer cloaked but radiant, her eyes twin galaxies of endless depth. Behind her shimmered shapes, ghostly figures moving within the light. He recognized some instantly. His father, his brother, others, countless others, all watching in silence. "You stand at the threshold," the keeper said softly. "The law of nourishment and neglect meets its reckoning here. Your father stood here once and faltered. You have come further than he did." Daniel's throat tightened. "Then tell me, what is this law? What does it want?" The keeper raised her hand, and the light shifted. Images unfolded around them, entire worlds blooming and fading like sparks in the dark. Oceans rising, forests growing, civilizations born from dust. "It wants nothing," she said. "It simply is. Every act of care, every seed of truth, every kindness nourishes life's fabric. Every act of indifference tears it apart. Humanity feeds the balance with every choice. That is the law you cannot escape." He looked around, eyes wide. "So all of this, the keys, my father, the voices, they were tests." "Reflections," she corrected gently. "Mirrors of what you nourished and what you neglected. Your father tried to control the law, to force nourishment through ambition. But ambition without conscience becomes rot. You, Daniel, tried to flee neglect, bury it in guilt, in silence. But silence feeds decay too. Only when you faced your shadow did you begin to nourish truth." Daniel felt a strange calm settle over him. "Then why bring me here? What happens now?" The keeper stepped closer. "You hold both keys, the truth and the remembrance. You may return to the world, but how you nourish it will shape everything that follows. Or," she paused, her eyes softening, "you may choose to stay. Become the next keeper. Guard the balance. Guide others before they fall to neglect." Daniel stared at her. The idea was impossible, and yet, for the first time, it didn't feel frightening. He thought of his father, lost in his hunger to master what should have been honored. He thought of Eli, a life cut short because Daniel had looked away. He thought of himself, running from pain instead of tending it. All his life, He had mistaken avoidance for survival. But now he understood. The law was never punishment. It was instruction. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Show me what happens if I return." The light shifted again. Before him appeared the world as it was, his home, the orchard, the ruins now blooming with green shoots. He saw himself walking among people again, speaking of what he had learned, healing what he once ignored. He saw lives changed not through power, but through understanding. The neglected became nourished, and the decay turned fertile again. Then the vision faded, replaced by another. The world without him. The balance untended. Humanity repeating the same cycle of neglect, forgetting truth until the law returned again to collect. He opened his eyes. "If I stay, what happens to them?" "They will forget," the keeper said softly. "The law hides itself until it must be remembered. Without a keeper, neglect spreads faster. But with one, even unseen, life continues to nourish itself." He looked once more toward the figures behind her. His father's face shone with quiet pride. Eli's spirit smiled faintly, as if telling him that it was time. The guilt he had carried for years loosened its grip, replaced by a warmth that filled every corner of his being. Daniel stepped forward. "Then I'll stay." The keeper nodded. "Then so shall the balance." The light around them swelled, and the two keys rose from his hands, merging into a single beam that pierced the void. It struck Daniel's chest, and he gasped, not in pain, but in revelation. His heartbeat slowed, then deepened, becoming something vast, echoing across unseen worlds. The silver veins of the chamber below, the roots of the old oak, the whispers of the journals, all began to hum in harmony. The keeper's voice echoed through the brilliance. "The law is not your master, Daniel Hargrove. It is your reflection. Neglect it, and it consumes. Nourish it, and it becomes you." And with that, she faded into the light. When Daniel opened his eyes again, he was standing in the orchard at dawn. The storm had passed. Sunlight broke through the clouds, soft and golden, warming his skin. The tree before him, once ancient and withered, was alive again, its leaves trembling with dew. Birds sang from its branches, and the air smelled of new beginnings. He looked down at his hands. The keys were gone, but a faint mark, two interlocking circles of gold and silver, glowed on his wrist. He smiled faintly. The world felt sharper, alive in a way he'd never noticed before. Every leaf, every breeze, every heartbeat seemed to hum with quiet purpose. As he turned to leave, a whisper rode the wind, his father's voice, calm and sure. "Remember, son, the law is not to be feared. It is to be lived." Daniel walked down the hill, the morning sun rising behind him, his shadow stretching long and luminous across the grass. He didn't know what would come next, but he no longer needed to. He had seen what neglect created and what nourishment restored. From that day on, the townspeople spoke of a man who returned after a decade, quiet yet radiant, who rebuilt the Hargrove estate not as a mansion, but as a sanctuary. He never spoke of the chamber, nor the keeper, nor the light, but those who listened to him felt something awaken within themselves. And so the law lived on, not in stone, nor in words, but in hearts willing to tend the unseen gardens of truth and compassion. Because the law was never about escape. It was about becoming the very balance one seeks to find. And somewhere beneath the roots of the great oak, the ground pulsed faintly with light, gold and silver intertwined, waiting for the next soul ready to listen, ready to nourish, ready to remember.